It started like any other day, about 6 years ago. I was sitting at the computer, drawing, but I dropped my stylus. So, of course, I bent down and forward a bit to pick it up. Hi, I'm Wisty, and this is the story of how I broke my back. Well, when I say broke, I actually mean fractured, but it's really all the same in terms of cause and effect, really. I'm an artist who specializes in character art and live 2D. Sometimes I talk about video games, VTubing and its culture, and general art industry things, but today it's story time, so buckle up. This is a story about how I learned just how fragile human bodies are, and I gained a whole new appreciation for the history of historical corsetry. I promise those two things are linked, and I messed up that word like heck. So, as I was saying, it started like any other day about 6 years ago. I was at my computer, as I normally do, working on a commission, I think, when I went and dropped my stylus. Not really thinking anything of it, I kind of leaned to the side and pick it up, sliding forward on my chair and bam. I ended up sliding straight out of my chair and landing directly on my tailbone, on the concrete floor. Then, like now, I was living in a basement apartment, with the only thing between me and pure concrete being a flimsy little carpet, which is probably why I was only fractured and not fully broken, come to think about it. It hurt a lot. That landing, even though it was only about 18 inches between my ass and the floor at that point. I didn't think anything of it. I thought it was just going to be like a bruise. It's going to hurt for a little while. But then I went to stand up and I found that I couldn't move. There was this shooting pain up my spine, and my legs felt like they'd gone numb all of a sudden. So I grabbed my stylus and placed it on the desk above me, and I used my desk to pull myself up, so I was at least properly seated in my chair again. And when I tell you I was terrified, I was utterly terrified. I was hoping that feeling would come back into my legs after a while, and when it did, oh my god, it was the worst pain I've ever felt. When I tell you it was so intense I cried, that's not an understatement. I have a condition called fibromyalgia, which is an autoimmune disorder of some sort, where essentially your brain tricks itself into thinking that you're in pain everywhere, all the time. It sucks. The only medication I've had that seems to cut through it properly are opioids, but since those aren't always available, and I don't want to overuse them for good reason, I've kind of learned to make do with a cocktail of way too much acetaminophen and ibuprofen for daily use. So when I tell you that my general pain tolerance is fairly high, insofar as pain I can effectively ignore, believe me, I won't go to the doctor for anything unless it is actively impairing my ability to do what I need to do, for a lot of reasons. Partially because I was raised to just ignore everything until it's literally killing you. My parents are all the same way. They won't go to the doctor for anything unless you're pretty much halfway onto your deathbed anyway. Anyway, so after a little while of just sitting there in pain, in agony, crying, I had to pee. So I got up and dragged myself to the bathroom. I had to sort of hobble to get there, grabbing onto walls and railings as I went, and the peeing itself was absolute agony. I could not move my back far enough to do any of the actual cleanup, which really fucking sucked. And then my dad called and asked me to go do some chores with him, and at that point I could walk enough to kinda climb into the truck, but it was beyond excruciating. So I ended up cleaning myself up and going upstairs and getting ready to go. We climb into the truck, and Dad looks at me, and he's like, "Are you okay?" And I just go, No, I fell on my back and now I can't really feel my legs and everything hurts. And he looks at me and he's like, okay, we're going to the hospital. He noticed, which is amazing. So I must not have been hiding it well, because this is a man who wouldn't notice an apocalypse if it was happening right in front of his face. So we ended up in the hospital, and instead of doing those chores, I told him I'd hurt my back, and so we waited. Eventually, after several hours, I was called in for a scan, and we found out what happened. I actually had to look up my old records for this, because at this point I couldn't remember exactly which ones it was, but apparently I'd severely fractured my sacrum, which is a little bit right above the tailbone, and 1.5 and 1.4 on my lumbar vertebrae. I thought, oh shit, this is going to suck. But they'll be able to fix it, right? You'd think so, but not that easily, it would appear. When I asked what to do now, all the doctor could say to me was, and I remember this verbatim, well, what do you want me to do about it? Fix it? That's what I want you to do about it. I'm presuming he noticed my, baffled look, because the doctor sighed and basically said, other than meds and physical therapy, there's not much we can do for back fractures. You kind of just have to hope it heals properly, but most don't. And I'm like, good bedside manner there. I was completely dumbfounded. In this state, I could barely even walk, let alone twist myself to wipe my ass. I was frustrated beyond belief. I didn't even know what to do. And I'm sure I started crying again because my dad, who was in the room with me, was really mad. I guess the doctor conceded because he told me that they could fit me with a medical brace to keep my back straight and hoped that would aid in the healing. So I agreed. They took my measurements and sent me home with some strong meds to help me get through it. It took about a week of agony to get the brace in, because it had to be custom made. But when I received it, I think my first reaction was, this is just a corset. The lady who was fitting it on me said, yeah, most of the corsets you see in movies are pretty exaggerated. But it honestly made me curious about corsetry in general, the history of it, and I did some research. As it turns out, most corsets, being these horrible, uncomfortable things that make it hard to breathe, is pure myth. Tight lacing, or the act of lacing a corset as tightly as possible to achieve impossible waist widths, also wasn't really a thing. Kinda like the Tide Pod challenge of today, a lot of news outlets talked about it as this whole, look at what these crazy, stupid, vapid women are doing, sort of a pearl clutching issue, when, if it was happening, it was only an extremely teeny, tiny part of the population. Most people who need corsets were working women who would obviously need to be able to use their bodies and to lift things and do their jobs. Corsets are essentially meant for lift and support, to keep your back straight and lift all of your fat and breast matter up without putting pressure on your shoulders, which would obviously put pressure on your back. The corset bears the weight of your body. When I was wearing the medical brace, I felt better, lighter, supported, even better than the best bra I'd ever used, and I have J-cups. It probably also helps that it was keeping my back straight, which is something that I'm very bad at in general. Anyway, it took months for me to feel anywhere near normal again. I still don't have my full range of motion back, and standing for too long, such as doing dishes, sends shooting pain up my spine. Pain medication is still a daily occurrence, but it's better than before. Swimming in the local pool is the kind of exercise I can do now, along with the stretches from physical therapy. Anything more strenuous than that isn't exactly in the cards for me, but we carry on and work with it, because I guess that's all we can really do, right? Anyways, that's the story. I know it wasn't really dramatic or super exciting, but it's not really something I see talked about all that much. Just finding out that there's not a lot that doctors can do about back injuries shocked me, and I feel that's something that more people should be aware of. Take care of your bodies, because you never know when an accident can happen. And with that being said, do consider giving a like and a subscribe. It really does help me out. I make videos about art, games, tech, VTubing, and I'd really love to hear from you if you've ever experienced something in the medical field that shocked you. Toodaloo!